Live from historic Fort Andros in downtown Brunswick, your way to wake up on the Midcoast. The Midcoast Morning Buzz. Richard Kazimer, Jim Bleikamp, Radio 9, WCME.
Well, Jim, our guest this morning is Jackie Sartoris, old friend. She's an attorney and an advocate for all things right and just here on the planet. Jackie, along with Amy Barabee of Midcoast Hospital, will be co-chairing a National Healthcare Decisions Day free workshop at Midcoast Hospital next Tuesday, April 16th. And it's all about understanding and filling out the actual Advanced Care Directive, which is also known as end-of-life decisions. And it's not a scary subject at all. We all reach that point in our lives, and I think this is a very good thing that we all need to be prepared for. Information is power. Jackie, thank you so much for coming in today. Fill us in on what these forms actually are. And again, these are not the death panel forms that go to some secret government agency that they come around in a big truck and haul old people off, much as what the Republicans and the teabaggers made a focal point of their failed campaign the last presidential election.
Well, I did look around for a death panel form, and I actually didn't see any death panel forms, certainly not in Maine.
Look harder. It's got to be there somewhere.
These forms are actually kind of not frightening at all once you look at them, and they're available for free online. You can fill them out. You do not need an attorney. You don't even need a notary if you want to use those forms in Maine. You just need a couple of witnesses. But the seminar that we're giving on Tuesday is a free seminar. I would urge anyone who's interested to call 373-4656. If you do get an answering machine, leave your full name and phone number if you're asked to leave a message. That'll be at Midcoast on Baraboo, actually not at the hospital, but at the Health Services Center. And that's from 10 to noon. And why are we doing this? We're doing this because on April 16th, it is National Healthcare Decisions Day, and that's a day when folks at the national level have joined together to encourage people to get to know what healthcare decisions are all about, what the forms are, that they're not scary, but they're really essential in helping people make their own choices about end-of-life care or very ill care. And it also gives direction to your family so that they're not having to stress about what would mom or dad want. You've got that information right there.
That's a very important point. I think you're making there the last thing you said, because there could be a tendency to think that this is a senior citizens issue when in fact it's of interest to anybody who might be in a position to take care of an older adult, or perhaps I would think maybe someone who suffers some kind of injury or illness, maybe younger in life, and all of a sudden finds themselves in need of care, right?
Well, actually, I think the best time to do these forms is now. No matter how old you are, if you're an adult and you have any sort of adult responsibilities, then I think that it makes a lot of sense to really look for the form. You can Google it. It's very easy to find under Maine Healthcare Form or Maine Healthcare Directive. The form is available for free, as I said. It's not a really, really long form, and it's very clearly written. But the idea really is anyone of any age should have a package of materials they've kind of gone through. There's a woman who set up a website called Get Your, let's say, Stuff Together. Her husband suffered a debilitating accident in his 40s, and she realized that there was just a whole package of things that they could have done in a very short amount of time. Most of them can be done with or without the assistance of an attorney. It would have made her life a lot easier if they'd gone ahead and done those things in advance. So my husband and I are in our 40s. We've sat down and we've done the Advanced Healthcare Directive. I won't say he took the entire thing seriously, but I'm glad we've started the conversation, and I think in a little while we're going to have something that we've both signed that we can then put aside, kind of have the peace of mind of knowing that we've sent some direction if something happens to us that we don't expect.
I think it's a fine thing that you're doing this and that you're sending out this warning and reminding people and this advisory kind of thing you're doing, but I'm just hearkening back, listening to you talk. I happened to have a conversation a couple weeks ago with a woman in Topsom who's running a small assisted living facility, and she told me that nobody ever plans for this stuff. Even when, well, not nobody, but many, many people do not. Even when, it's obvious that there is maybe a boomer adult beginning to care for a much older adult, as long as that adult is functional and basically taking care of him or herself, there's a great tendency not to plan for the day when that will no longer be the case and an assisted living facility may be needed or something similar. People just don't want to face up to that until the time actually comes.
So I think that there's actually, in part because of the baby boomer generation's tendency to, be a little more lighthearted at times about things, there is a growing movement to make this not quite as difficult an issue to face. So as I said, there is a website out there called Get Your, say, Stuff Together that actually has a checklist of all kinds of things that you should look at now while you're healthy, before there's an issue. And it's, as I said, it's pretty easy to do. Why, though, has National Healthcare Decisions Day come up? Well, it's because of that very gap that you're talking about, Jim, because an overwhelming number of people in the general public say they want to make their own healthcare decisions, but actually, although the number has grown of folks who have filled these forms out, it's still only it was 30% in 2006. So that's really pretty low when you think about it. I just want to spend a minute actually looking at the form. So you can go online and download the form, or you can certainly join us at the free seminar. Again, the number is 373-4656 to register for that next Tuesday from 10 to noon. So the form itself, very straightforward. The form itself is, and I want to apologize first, Amy Barabee actually has lost her voice, or she would be here today covering some of this. And she has really much more direct experience with the use of these forms because she is at Midcoast, so she sees how these forms come into play. And they're really powerful ways that people who, have maybe lost the ability to speak or the ability to really make decisions, that that what you're doing is what that person wanted done. There are a couple of things that you can do. One of them is to say, I don't want to make any of these decisions. I want you, this person I've nominated to be my agent, I just want you to make them for me. That in and of itself is a really powerful decision to make because it means you've handed that responsibility off to someone you trust, and it means that your other family members know that that's where things stand. Or you can hand those decisions off to an agent with very clear direction that they then have to follow. Again, the form is very clear. When you go through it, you can say, I do or do not want this kind of life-sustaining treatment. I do or do not want this kind of pain control. Very clear form. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would assume that the average person would at least want to think about providing some direction to whoever they designate as the caregiver or the decision maker, right? Because if you don't provide any direction, you're really turning over your whole life and destiny to one person. Well, I think for, my husband's initial reaction was, oh, you just make all the choices. And I think, in some ways, if you really don't want to have to think through all of those other things, that all by itself can be a perfectly valid decision to make. Once we started actually going through the form, though, he definitely had opinions. So I think, stepping through that process of going through the form is very helpful. And
I just want to say I'm acquainted with your husband, Steve Walker, and I've never really known him to be not opinionated in some way.
Well, what surprised me, this even includes, there's some optional sections in here, like whether you want to donate organs or tissues at death. What I was a little surprised at was there's also a do not resuscitate form, instructions to emergency medical services, in other words, ambulance crews, about what to do if your heart or breathing stops. So he was quite clear. He said, nope, in that case, I really don't want anything to happen unless the technician is really attractive, in which case, fine, go right ahead. So I didn't see a place to write that down, and we may have to have further discussions.
He is aware that, I think it was the AMA has now come out and said the mouth-to-mouth you really don't need. You just have to do the compression. So is that still on the table with him? Or?
Yeah, that might change his mind. I'll definitely share that with him.
Terrible news. Yeah. Terrible news.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll be devastated. So, this is really a specifically important issue in Maine because we do have the oldest median age in the country. We don't yet have kind of the oldest of the old, the high there. That's in Florida, but Maine is right after that. So this is an issue that more and more folks in Maine are going to face. I think one of the disturbing things is folks still really underuse hospice care. The numbers in Maine, some counties are fewer than 20% actually experience end-of-life care in hospice. And that, if you want to be home, and you can be home, that's great, but a lot of people are not able to either be at home and don't have hospice care at the end of life and can really end up in situations where they're hospitalized and maybe more decisions are being made than what they would want as far as end-of-life care goes. So this can really provide direction no matter where you are at the end of life.
I'd like to talk a second here on the safety issue as far as your personal information is concerned. So if people go to a specific website to fill out, and what they're looking for is it's called the actual Advanced Care Directive. Is that what they're looking for? They want to Google that. What website do you recommend people go to fill out this form? And again, when they fill out this form, are they filling it out online, or are they just printing it out as a PDF file? They save nothing. I mean, there's a lot of nefarious companies out there that are looking to extract information from people. So recommend where someone should go and what they should be looking for.
Well, that's a great question. The form is, if you Google, it is a PDF. You can't actually fill it out online. It's the main Healthcare Advanced Directive form. It was revised in February of 2008, and it's on DHHS's website, the Department of Health and Human Services, Maine's DHHS. So you can fill it out online. And actually, interestingly, there's very little personal information. Mm-hmm. No social security number, no phone number, no driver's license. It's your name. One of the recommendations that we'll be making at the workshop is that you put your name at the bottom of every page. Right now, there's no place for your name on every page. And if for whatever reason the pages get separated, obviously you want them all to sort of be together and available. So there's no personal information that goes anywhere. What you should do if you fill out one of these forms, first of all, you should discuss it with your family. You should discuss it with your primary care physician. If you travel out of state, a very strong recommendation is that you actually have the form notarized. If you don't travel out of state and you know you're going to be staying in Maine, the form doesn't need to be notarized. But some states that have advanced care directives require that they are notarized in order for them to be recognized and have effect. So you really want to go ahead and, I think, have that extra step done if you plan to travel out of state. For folks who are, getting up in age and are traveling, maybe to see grandkids and their kids, the recommendation is that you take a copy of this form when you travel out of state and let the people you're traveling with know that my personal information is here. That way, if it's needed, everybody knows where it is, and it can still have the effect that you want.
And once it's notarized, it is a legal binding document, correct? So the hospitals have to adhere to that document?
The hospitals do need to adhere to the wishes in this document, although, in terms of legal binding, it's binding on your agent, if you've elected an agent here. But, you can't really opt out of some hospital procedures. I mean, the hospital, if you want to say, wheel me in and do me in, that's not going to happen. You can't circumvent the law through the use of this form. So as far as being binding goes, it's going to be, your wishes are going to be followed to the extent that the hospital can follow your wishes. And, there are places in here where there are just lines that you can fill out. One of the things I don't like about the form and that I would ask to change if they're going to make modifications at some point, there's no place here where it says, what are your preferences as far as any sort of religious rites or any sort of visitation? I think that ought to be called out because that is so important to people, especially during end-of-life care. So unfortunately, there's nothing in here that says, here's the place where if you have any of these wishes, it would be a good idea. So if you want, a Father Guido Sarducci impersonator to show up at your bedside and administer what would not really be the last rites, but something like the last rites, there's really no place on that form where it's called out. I'm totally kidding. So there's also there's a bunch of lines in here that says, kind of tell us anything else you want to know. So that would be a place for you to say music, the kind of music I want played. I think you guys were playing Rhinestone Cowboy earlier this morning. Certainly the idea of kind of riding out on Rhinestone Cowboy might be maybe appealing to some folks. I was a little
Glenn
dubious.
Campbell does have Alzheimer's, and his tour is all about that, so there's an advocate right there.
Well, and very seriously, these are the kinds of discussions that people ought to have with their families.
Exactly.
There's another organization I just want to point folks to while I have your attention. It's Let's Have Dinner and Talk About Death. Believe it or not, it came out of a class at the University of Washington. They've just set up a website, and the whole idea is to sort of walk people through making end-of-life care and those decisions and what is important to you and what you want represented in those last months or days of life, how to do that with your family and support. when you think about it, I mean, some of my fondest memories are the glass of wine I shared with my sisters and our family after the death of a beloved elder. Some of those memories are, where you sit around and it's informal and you're joking and remembering that person really fondly, sometimes irreverently, but those are memorable and important. Wouldn't it be great if we could have some of those conversations before the end of life so that you really check in and find out what are the values this person wants to be remembered for? It's a great opportunity, actually. So my folks are back up here in just a couple of months. My aunt, who is 85, I know is a big healthcare advocate. She headed up several hospitals in her career. And we're going to sit down and have those conversations because I think it's important. It's too important to not have them. And it's the sort of thing you'll wish you'd done, I think, in the long run. So I encourage folks to do it. If you can't come to the seminar on the 16th, again, 373-4656 for the free seminar. I really encourage folks to start to have those conversations at home.
Excellent advice. And you may think that you were kidding about the Guido Sarducci impersonator, but you actually read my mind as to what I want at the end of my own life whenever that comes.
Me in trivial minutia, Don Novello, who plays Guido Sarducci, his sister used to be the Surgeon General of the United States.
Bush administration. First Bush
Wow, you guys definitely ought to have a, strange trivia day.
There should be a form for what we do. We have no life.
No one could ever concoct it. Nobody would believe it if we did concoct it.
Our guest this morning has been Jackie Sartoris. She's an attorney. Jackie and Amy Barabee of Midcoast Hospital will be holding the National Healthcare Decisions Day free seminar, free workshop at Midcoast Hospital next Tuesday, April 16th from 10 o'clock until noon. And it's all about filling out the Advanced Care Directive. Jackie, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
You've made our lives a lot better this morning. Radio 9 WCME.